question.
Thank you, and I think that's really important. Now, can I ask you two questions? Would you agree with me that there are things in our own scriptures, and I for one will say that definitely in the Christian scriptures, that are not conducive to peaceful living and to a just society? I want to ask you that, and the reason why I want to ask you that is that can we begin to be self-reflective enough in our own religion? Like, it's easy to say it's only political people who abuse our religions, and yes, they have, for crusades or whatever it is in history, and yet still we must acknowledge that in our scriptures there are problems. There are problems, and they were written a long, long time ago, and none of those things are, in my view, absolute anymore in the 21st century. We need to, and that's why I think young people are leaving religion in Australia and other places, and if we are willing to engage with why they're leaving with religion, then I think religion will be renewed, and it will actually have the capacity to strengthen our world. So I want to ask you to what you think of what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's the management of words.
Look, this might sound like a real cop-out, but as I mentioned earlier, I'm not of the clergy, so really I don't think, personally, I'm in a position to talk about the reinterpretation of scriptures, be they of my faith or others.
Next question.
We'll leave it at that.
We've got time for one more question. Yes, Caroline. Do you want to?
I've got voice. One of the key things which all three speakers discussed was education. How do we move people from education into action? How do we move people to want to go from simply believing that it's okay and believing in interfaith and believing in peace into actually acting on it, on the political sphere and also in the business sphere and in the clergyman sphere? That's all three.
I'm being asked, but is that working? Yeah. The Rabbi is saying I should answer, but I've already said so much, I should be quiet.
Look, I can maybe answer on the political side. One thing that I'm using and working with in my community is a great example of the education being put into action, which happened late last year. So last year we had a Muslim group who were using a community facility in St Kilda as a prayer room once a week on Fridays, and we had this wonderful society called the Q Society, which some of you may have heard of, who threw up a wonderful fuss about all this dangerous activity that Muslims were allegedly concocting in their weekly religious service. So there were various petitions that this society had put to the council, and the council needed to consider that. And what we found was that the JCMA, who I mentioned earlier, the Jewish Christian Muslim Association, really sort of pulled all the levers really that they had available to them in supporting what this group of Muslims were doing, which was essentially just conducting a religious service in St Kilda. And in particular, given the nature of the location, the Jewish community also really came up to the plate and were equally very, very supportive. So often when I have the chance to talk to my community, I talk about that particular instance as a living example of why, sometimes you need to demonstrate to people, what are the benefits. And that might sound a little bit selfish, but, sometimes you need that initial hook to get them on board, and once they're off the money, they see the many other benefits, as opposed to maybe some of the more superficial. So that's what I would say from a political perspective.
Great question. The truth is that there's a very long bridge between theory and action. And it's a tough bridge to cross for anybody. It's easy to pontificate, it's easy to to express platitudes. It's very hard to walk the walk. I'm reminded of this very colorful character in the 1920s. His name was Samuel Red Levine. They used to call him Red. He was a redhead. And he was a paid assassin. You could hire him to murder somebody, to kill somebody. But he was also a religious Jew, so he never did it on Shabbat, on Saturday. There was one time you could hire him 6 days a week, but on the Sabbath he rested. So of course, what's going on over there? The Talmud tells of this fascinating individual who's just dug a hole, a tunnel, into somebody's home, and he's about to pull off a job, he's about to rob their home, and he prays to God to ask for success. So does he believe in God, or he doesn't? God is not very pro-thievery, by the way. It's one of the big no-nos. So you're not allowed to steal, and this guy's stealing, but he believes in God, and that's the problem, because there's a disconnect between how we think and how we believe, and often how we behave. But that is a part of the human condition, and I think character, moral character, is about aligning, what we say and what we think and what we believe with how we behave on a daily basis. And that is the challenge of life, and it's a challenge that each and every one of us constantly struggles with on a daily basis, myself very much included. And so therefore, and I guess communities struggle with that as well. But I do concur with what's been repeated often today, and that is that these type of engagements are so vital and so important in bringing these wonderful ideals and ideas into the practical reality.
Thank you. I know there are more people who want to ask questions, but I also know that many of us need to get back to work. So I'm going to ask them to wrap up.
Thank you. So on behalf of KPMG, I would like to thank our speakers today, Rabbi Avrohom, Father Christiansen, and Sheikh Nadeem Hussain. And I thank them for, firstly, their time, but also their candidness and openness in preparing their insights today. I'd also like to thank the partner organisations for this event, the ADC and JPD, who I mentioned earlier. And just a brief plug for KPMG. We are quite fortunate that we have a very strong diversity agenda within our firm, and that's what enables us to sponsor and hold events like this. So I do hope that we'll be able to hold some more of these in the future, and I thank you for your attendance today.
Thank you very much. Please feel free to hang around. There are more bagels, and there'll be a visitor service for anyone who's interested in the room next door. Gentlemen? Oh, just across here. Thank you very much, everyone.
Short, but good. The Jewish theater of everything is a joke. Well, you might as well do it. Why not? Why not? Right? Pardon? Yeah, I know. Oh, you could see people's faces. Well, why not? Why not? Eh? That's why we're here. I would have thought we would. Yeah, I would have thought we would have spoken more about that. And it's just about the whole conflict in terms of, we did get mentioned with Muslims and, being not liked, but also the conflict in Palestine, Israel, things everywhere, conflicts. What can we do,
Yeah, well, we're not going to get it up.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Excellent. Yeah. Okay, we'll speak together
about how we can do more, because they were actually asking me, could I organise a Christians Against SRI, or rather a Christian, because they're all for religion, about all the religions, those people. Yes, we will. What is a miniature service?
Yeah, come in.